Hey everyone, just a quick announcement before we start this video. I'm going to be at Trojan Horse Was a Unicorn this year, so if you're going, I'd love to meet up. So hit me up in the messaging system of any one of these apps, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, and I'll see you there. Now, let's start the demo. Hi everyone, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 4.3 demo for the piece I call the Nazgûl. A long time ago at a sketch bomb, I did this sketch right here. It was just some Colorace pencil and a Micron pen, just a really quick fun thing, but there was something about the energy of it that I just kind of liked, and I thought it'd be fun to bring out and paint, something that I really never considered doing with it. So that's what you see here, is me bringing the line art in and doing the sort of line art cleanup that I showed a couple of videos ago, just so that I can get it to a good enough state that I'm still using it as a reference for how this piece is going to be. Now also something that's very different about this than most of the work that you see me do is there's basically no color in it. I believe there's like very small amount of tonal color there, but for the most part it is just grays all across everything. And I had considered finding some excuses to get color in there, but since I usually do things with lots of color, I thought let's just try and go completely grayscale with it, and that's really all the Nazgûl are, is grayscale. So as for which one of the Nazgûl this is, or the specific type of Nazgûl, or any of those types of details, I'm not that guy. So when I originally drew him, I just kind of did the quick rough, and then I googled him, and then was like, okay, cool, yeah, glove, like gauntlet thing, cloaky thing. So he's probably missing some details. Like I know when I was reviewing this later, I noticed that they have like these tassel type things that come down and all that kind of stuff. So not at all super accurate. Think of this more as just impressionistic take on a Nazgûl. So now that that's out of the way, so that the Tolkien fans don't go completely nuts on me, we can talk about the actual painting. And the funny thing about this is the painting is done very similarly to how you see me do most things. The difference being is that I use black for all of the shadows in this, but then I just adjust its opacity. Setting black to multiply really doesn't do anything for you, since black is going to be black anyways. So it's really just these gray flats that you see being laid in, and then I use black as my shadow layer and then adjust its opacity to what feels right, and then another black as the direct light layer, so it's the ambient occlusion in the direct light layer, and then that's all I'm doing. So from like a layer organization and just sort of complexity point of view, it's really simplistic. This one is truly simplistic. We've got the figure, which is the big gray mass. Then we've got the flat for where the opening is, where his face would be, and which is on the same layer as the one for his sleeve. And then we've got his hand, which I did break the hand up into a couple of layers just for, you know, ease purposes. But then the rest of it is just that's just it. And then at the end I throw in like some background elements and some foreground elements, really just to try and get some depth in there. But it's all just done really fast and really loose. The whole purpose of this one was to do something like as simple as possible and just have fun with it, especially since the original sketch is also simple from a sketch perspective. So it's just about, you know, energy and simplicity, really. That's also why you can see that like in his glove design, his gauntlet, like it's not really specific. It's purposefully that way. It's meant to just sort of be like a quick doodly impression of like, yeah, and then they have gloves that are like this, and that's all it is. And so I tried to do that also in the paint, although it's really hard, at least for me, to maintain the same energy all the way through. There are some artists that I love that like really can maintain the energy of their sketch all the way through to the final illustration, and that's just something that I've always worked really hard at doing, but I feel like I don't really connect it that often. So it's really just an attempt to try and do that as much as possible. So now we'll bring in some of the foreground and background elements, which is just me taking that turpentine brush set to white. Actually, I believe this wasn't white with a lowered opacity. I think I had it an actual gray. And the background is like some smudgy crap for like the background most fog, and then another layer on top of that so that I can create some depth between those two layers, and then one all the way on the top, the one that's slightly obscuring the figure. So now we're moving through doing the ambient occlusion pass, which is what you see there. Again, this is a black layer that just has a reduced opacity on it. And judging by how it's affecting that gray there, I would say that it's probably reduced down to 30-40%, maybe 30. But I mean, you can eyeball that for whatever you're working on. Now, this is probably a good opportunity for me to address the fact that I don't usually paint with grayscale and then colorize it later. I'm not a fan of that method. It's not that I'm not a fan of the end result. There are people who do amazing work with it. I'm just not a fan of it for my own process. I've tried it several times. I've tried it using gradient maps. I've tried it using just where you manually paint over. I've tried a bunch of things like that, and it just never really works out for me. I'm a bigger fan of incorporating the color like in the process. So it's just really, at the end of the day, no process. Well, I won't say no process, because there are some processes that are probably a complete mess, but the point is that the process isn't really important other than your comfortability with it. At the end of the day, if you're getting the results you want and you're doing it in the amount of time with the amount of energy that you think you should exert in order to get it done, really any process is good. If you've been watching my videos a lot, you might be affected by my process, and it might be something that clicks with you, and then you start doing something like it. But of course, if you were watching my videos and it doesn't work for you, then you aren't going to like a lot of the steps that I show. And it's not really a matter of right or wrong, it's a matter of comfortability, and at the end of the day, it should be what works for you the best, what gets you to where you want to go in your piece. One thing that's kind of interesting is the gauntlet on these characters is usually like really pitted and like really kind of scratchy and damaged, and it's got enough shine there that it looks metallic, but it's not crazy shiny like chrome. So it's kind of a weird material to try and replicate. Not that it's not weird like it's a nightmare or anything. It's just you're going for something real specific. You're not just going for like generic metal, right? So with this, I try to use texture at the end to give it a little bit more oomph, and then try to find that right level of shine in there as well. At this point, we're getting to the end of the ambient occlusion pass. We're working on the cloak here, just trying to get all those wrinkles and stuff to feel right. And you'll see the layer adjust a bit here. Right there, it just got really dark, and that's just showing that it's a black layer, and I'm changing its opacity so that I can try to adjust certain aspects of this, and when I make it a little bit darker, it's easier to see. And so, you know, you want it to look a certain way in the end result, but sometimes when you're in the middle of working on one of these things, it's hard to see some of the changes. So you might do something like make his cloak blue, or make the layer darker than the shadow darker than you were originally intending, things like that, just so that you can see it a little better. And that's what you'll see me do from time to time in here. And so now we're done with the ambient occlusion pass, and we're doing the direct lighting pass right here. So this is using black again, but adjusting the opacity to where I want. I think this is a little bit stronger in intensity. Oh, and you can see there on his sleeve, I've lowered the opacity of his sleeve so that I can better see exactly how all of the shadow is laying in there. And that's just an example of adjusting it when you're in the middle of it so that it's easier on you, so you can see the changes that you're making. Cool how I fell ass backwards into a bit of a Mignola vibe on this. I wasn't really going for that, but then when I come back and I look at some of the structural aspects of the cloak, I'm definitely reminded of that and the times when he's gotten a more painterly treatment put on his work. So that was kind of a fun accident, but I'm really happy with the way that it looks, and I'm not going to steer it away from that just because it makes me think of that. I think it's more just one of those happy accidents that I think I'm actually weirdly proud of aspects of this piece because it's not my usual thing, and I just think I captured certain aspects well, at least well for me. As for these highlights, I tried to keep the highlights on the cloak at a minimal, and that's just done with a white layer with a lowered opacity because we're keeping everything in this this realm of just using blacks and whites at different opacities. And then on his glove, I'm trying to add some shine, trying to bring some style into there since the whole thing is stylized, and trying to find where that balance is between making it look like the Nazgûl from the movies, but still keeping it stylized like it's something that I might do. And of course now we're working on this bounce light that's coming up from the bottom. The lighting on this is basically top down with a little bit of a bounce coming up, and I'm just painting that in white as well, and then I'll adjust that opacity. Now in order to fill out that background, I do this sort of streaky, vertical streaking thing, and that's just to give it like a cool look back there, try to bring that sense of dread, pulling everything down, and so it has this like looming darkness aspect. On top of having the fog and everything going on around it. For a second I considered throwing his sword in, because as it stands he's got like the one hand out, but then his left side of his body kind of goes out of frame, and I thought let's bring the sword in and maybe have the other hand in there. And I played with it for a second, and even though it'd be cool because it would point more towards him being a Nazgûl, I thought like it's actually kind of noisy, and I liked the simplicity of just like the one claw up. So at some point during this time lapse you're gonna see this big streaky sword come in and blip out. This is where I was messing with some color temperature. There you go, there's the sword, blipped in, blipped out, and you saw some color temperature stuff there, but I ended up ditching it and going pretty much down the barrel neutral. We now have a texture on the glove, which is just some rando metal texture, and now I'm putting a little bit of damage into the cloak just to give that a little bit more visual interest. And sometimes we get to points like this where I don't know what's happening. Also, when I'm recording on iMovie, there's a big window at the bottom of the image that says like recording, so I can't see things that happen like in the bottom fifth of the screen, but whatever. This is a low rent operation and we're gonna keep it that way. If I start getting too fancy, we're in trouble. This sort of stylistic dark outline around the entire thing. It's black with a lowered opacity. I mess with some blurs, but I do the whole trick where I damage the painterly. I create a painterly look. I've covered that in past videos. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the trick where I blur a duplicate of the image, mask it all out, and then I use a turpentine brush to bring the image back. So this is the final version of the image. I hope you dig it. I know that it's like simple and kind of dull, and that's actually exactly what I was going for, so if it's boring to you, then that's just what it is. If you like it, I'm glad you like it, because it showed a lot of restraint on my part. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video or any others, please consider liking them all, subscribing to the channel. It really helps, and I'll see you on the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.